really well.
Well, hello, Blaine.
Hello, Rhett. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Good.
How's your week going?
It's you and I today. Looks like so. Those of you that are watching and expecting David to show up, his mother passed yesterday, so he will not be joining us today. And in the meantime, you're going to have the Rhett and Blaine show.
All right.
So, and we're still waiting for our first guest to come in. So, you've got a TED Talk coming up. I think you mentioned that you're going to be spending a little time in a cave preparing for it at the end of the month. And I love the topic. What if? I mean, that just evokes all kinds of stuff. So, kind of, where do you intend going with that?
So, I was sort of going back and forth on what really was important to me to talk about this time, and going back to our profession, which is coaching. I was talking this over with a speaker coach and somebody that's done a lot of these talks, and we were talking about what I wanted to talk about. And this question of what if has been a really prominent thing in my life. And I talk about the story of my son being born, and he was born with what's called a congenital diaphragmatic hernia. And the night that he was born, the doctor told me, he said, look, 95% of these kids die. I need you to go ahead and prepare for his passing tonight, and for the aftermath of that. And I looked at him with this blank stare, and I said, no. What if he makes it? I can't go there in my mind. And it's just like starting a business. I can't go there at the beginning of that and say, well, what if it fails?
Yeah.
Because, so psychologically for me as a person, I can't live in the what if something bad happens. I live in the space of what if it works.
Exactly. I love that.
Yeah, that's the whole thing.
Yeah. My wife, she's got this diagnosis. It's actually a fairly serious and significant one too.
Yeah.
And, we've got an oncologist here in Seattle, and we've got another oncologist that we're working with. And, what you're talking about is a continuum. And the oncologist here is a traditional oncologist, great guy, love him. And he's going, well, statistically, this is likely going to be the outcome. And it's kind of like doom and gloom and, oh my God, and it's apocalypse. The other oncologist is going, hey, hope runs amok here if you're willing to hold on to it and grab it, because there's a possibility. There's always a possibility. And both of them exist on a continuum. And it was interesting because, Cynthia and I walked away from a conversation with the local doc up here, the oncologist up here. And we kind of backed up a little bit and said, wait a minute, he's got more faith in his statistical data than the other doc has in that data. The other doc has his faith in there's always a possibility for a positive outcome. Which one do we want to land on? They're on a continuum. We get to make a choice. And that's exact what if this happened?
And the power of that, right?
Exactly.
The power of that thinking like that, because it doesn't do any. I mean, you're a realist. You know the outcome, what the possible outcomes are, right? It's not that you're ignoring those. It's just that you can't start. That can't be the starting point for what you have to get through, right?
The biology of hope comes into play.
Yes, it does. And I think we have guests.
I think we've got guests. Hallelujah.
Hey, guys. How are you? Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Good to have you on the show. I don't know if you necessarily heard the preamble on this, but David won't be making it today. He his mother passed last night or yesterday afternoon. Yesterday
sorry.
morning. So he appropriately is not here. So
Absolutely understand.
yeah. So, but it's great to have you here.
I appreciate it. My apologies up front. I'm on my phone. I'm technologically challenged, having run multiple tech startups. So I my laptop to work. We had really good outcomes on those tech startups, but I can't make a freaking thing work here. So I'm on my phone. My apologies up front.
Well, given that we're going to be looking and exploring and unbundling employee productivity, it's going to be a great one.
Yes, I'm very unproductive, as you can tell.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon. Yeah, no, Prodoscore, it's a startup. Yeah, you're doing some very interesting things. And there was two things that struck me when we started, just kind of looking at a little bit about what you're up to here. One is, obviously employee productivity, and just kind of most people understand at least the label of what that implies. But the idea of data visualization and how you're actually combining the two of these in a platform. Can you talk a little bit about that? Just kind of pretend that we're third graders and we need to be educated here.
Yeah, no, so good afternoon again, and thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I think in a nutshell, the idea is to assess employees' productivity or not, agnostic of where they are, in office, remote, hybrid, but utilizing data. We're hearing a lot about in the public domain now of things, people being terminated, firing people left and right. And we're not passing judgment on the efficacy of those hires or fires. All we're advocating for is to do it with actual objective data. Historically, a lot of CEOs like myself and others have been more subjective. Hey, I feel it this way. It's intuitive. This is my thought process, versus what we can now show and illustrate is actual granular data on productivity of employees throughout their workday, irrespective of where they are.
So we hear all this push, particularly with the federal government, and requiring everybody come back to work. But what is the data on actual productivity for people who are remote versus people in the office? Is there good data on that?
Great question, and we have as good a data as there is. We're certainly not the end all be all, but we have about 140,000 employees currently on the platform. Mm-hmm. Amongst the disparate of customers and verticals and categories. Undoubtedly, hybrid is the best productivity outcome. Period! Exclamation point.
It's a combination of what? Like, how does that?
3-2 or 4-1 is the ideal. It all depends, but 3-2 tends to be the highest and most optimal outcome. So the idea of full remote or full in office has been completely kind of torn down. That idea that has one of those extremes. We've shown now that the hybrid model, employees love it because they could reduce travel, be more, family time, kids time, and a tool like ours provides significant visibility for the employer to ensure that there's accountability happening while you give the employee the flexibility to work 3 days remote, 2 days remote, whatever structure you choose.
Interesting. When you're talking about accountability, what are the metric dynamics that come into play here when you're actually working with this? Because accountability has a metric measure, or it has a way of saying yes or no. What is it? What are we saying yes or no to?
Yeah. So at our core, we look at activity. I'm a big believer that the condition and precedent to performance and outcomes is activity. I think it's a leading indicator to the end result of your quarterly numbers, your monthly numbers. And we think as activity increases, we have data that shows it directly correlates to productivity and better outcomes. And those activities could be as simple of email, Salesforce, chat function. We're heavy into collaboration, how the organizational network looks like. A lot of times by being hybrid, you don't see the tentacles of the organization. People tend to end up in silos. And what our tool surfaces is allows to see the connectivity of everyone. I'll give you an example. We have a large client that came to us and said, we're looking to have a reduction in force. We're looking to kind of let go of a tranche of our staff. We don't know what's going to happen when that occurs. So immediately, hey, let's fire Sam. We save Sam's salary. Great. who is Sam talking to all day? Who is communicating with Sam and who is Sam communicating to? So we can show real time all of my ecosystem in the company. The minute you fire Sam, John, Bill, and Joe are going to be, oh my God, I have no one to communicate with.
Mm-hmm.
So we visualize that so HR and the C-suite can make an educated, intelligent decision.
That's
so
brilliant.
That is, I think it's kind of who's the centers of influence, and what are those centers of influence?
Exactly.
Yeah. They don't necessarily exist on the org chart.
Completely agree with you. And a lot of times they're not in our visibility. Sometimes middle management, you have some tremendous talent there that the people are relying on, but because senior management doesn't have visibility, if you let them go, it's a big domino and ripple effect in the organization.
Well, you also can see visibly who's actually doing what, and you actually learn who your A players are, and you can learn a lot by that. What's the model? What's the business model here? Is it a subscription? Is it how do people take part? How do people do this?
I'll answer that question in a second, but the first part you brought up really is the thesis of what we do. The simple thing is, what's the blueprint for success? If you find a successful person in a particular role, what can you do to replicate it? Who are the A players? How do we replicate the A players? How do we expedite onboarding, ramp up time from 4 months to 2 months? How do we expedite the performance of those people by visualizing the A player and replicating it? Going to your second question.
Let me stop you real quick though, but you're right, because when you are riffing people or letting people go, I know as a CEO, when I had to do that, I always wanted to keep my most valuable players.
Yeah.
Right. Because they could work cross-functionally. They could actually pick up, I knew I wanted to keep those people particularly.
Correct. And that's why we're so employee-centric. Our entire modus operandi is providing employees the blueprint. Even though the employer has visibility to all of it, and they have many of the areas they use, but an employee gets a daily Prodoscore email, AI-driven initiatives to show them what they should do during that day to be productive. Large language models processing all the activity for their cohorts, their peer group, to improve their productivity. And to answer your question, we're this classic SaaS company. It's a cost per seat per month. We have enterprise packages for very large enterprise customers.
Great. Sam, I want to thank you. We'll have you on another show when Dave is available again. Love this stuff. I think you are literally on a cutting edge, and it's not necessarily a bleeding edge. There's a cutting edge here. So
we're excited. We're really, really excited. I think we're on to something.
Exactly. And folks, you can find out more at prodoscore.com. That's where we're going to find you. And anything else that you, in terms of pointing people to what you're up to, that you would care to just drop in here right now?
Visit our website, prodoscore.com. There's a ton of information there, and reach us out, and we'll be very quick and responsive.
Okay, great. Sam, thanks a bunch. Appreciated having you on the show.
Thank you.
You bet. Love that model. That is brilliant.
Yeah, that's going to save a lot of people making those big mistakes when you just take an axe to things, and that you can be more strategic.
Yeah. Current situation in the world right now. This might be a very good tool for a couple of folks to be using before they start taking chainsaws where scalpels might be more appropriately used.
Yeah. Couldn't have had that a better time. He should be on the news talking about that right now, right?
I think so. Yeah. Well, we've got another fella in the wings here, and I think we're ready to bring him up. And I kind of had to chuckle a little bit. In his introduction. Yeah, John Hittler, and in parentheticals, just like you see there. Yes, that really is my name. I love it. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you. 4th grade was tough, I got to tell you.
Yeah, it was. I think that's when you pop your teacher in the nose, isn't it?
Yeah, the playground is a rough place with that name. Yeah, exactly.
Good.
Well, hey, my kids' last names are Power, so I feel I was my last name Power, so I get it.
Power is not too.
My youngest son is max power though. My oldest son is max power. So you got to test it.
Here was my savior. The public schools went kindergarten to 6th grade, and then they went junior high. But I was in a Catholic grade school, and we went 1st grade to 8th. So in 7th grade, we got an influx of kids from the private school because the Catholic schools were feeders for the private high schools. So they would come in for the last 2 years. Who shows up in 7th grade right about the time that the abuse is horrible? Harry Dong. First generation Hong Kong immigrants, and his parents wanted the most American name they could have. So they named him after Harry Truman. Wow. And the poor kid, so he's 13 and he shows up, and I thought, no more hassle for me. My life is easy now that Harry Dong is there. He was the nicest guy. And I thought, just clueless parents, because they're first generation from Hong Kong. They had no idea. But imagine your daughter comes home and says, hey, Dad, I got invited to the prom. Well, who are you going to go with? I'm going with, his name's Harry. What's his last name? I can't remember his last name.
Yeah, no.
Poor guy. And I thought,
kidding.
Yeah. Oh, well. So.
Now, you've got a talent discovery process that you want to talk about here, and that I'm really, Rhett and I both are very interested in here. And you've got a background here that's also interesting that I think is going to be germane to this conversation here. But let's start with the genius talent discovery. What's up with that, and kind of how did you land on that? And you do a lot of work with CEOs, more as a kind of CEO whisperer, the advisory role that you're in, and that sort of thing.
That's all I work with is CEO. I work with CEOs, and then in the genius talent, teams. I work with anyone. But imagine that in your DNA. I mean, we don't really know what's in our DNA, but imagine that something as simple as a unique genius level talent is in every person's DNA. If that's true, and we don't try to prove it, we surmise it, it means you have a talent that no one else in the history of humanity has ever had. And if we put a boatload of money in front of you and say, all you have to do is tell us what it is, and you get $1 million bucks, nobody could ever tell us what it was. And so we had this theory, and we said, that's weird that people have these talents and they can't, they don't know. So they'll say simple things like, well, I think it's with people. And you go, okay, that's not genius, and that's not unique, and it's too generic. So they'll give you funny things, or they give you long explanations, and we say, no. What if you actually knew exactly what your talent was and how valuable it was? Would that be helpful? And for CEOs, what we find is they're running a playbook usually from Elon or from Bezos or from Sarah Blakely, and it's completely inauthentic to their talent set. So they're supposed to be doing things like Bezos did as if they're Bezos. And you say, what if all three of us had a talent way better than Bezos, where we had that talent and ran our company through that instead? We're going to have a whole lot easier time. And so what we did was it took us almost 2 years, but we developed a process where we tease it out of people. They don't realize they're giving us bits and pieces, and we start connecting up and feeding it back to them. And they say, where'd you get that? I said, no, David, you told me that. And he said, I did? Well, you didn't tell me directly, but you gave it to me in 6. And we start feeding them back to it, and they say, you're right, I can do that in my sleep. You say, do you realize how powerful that is? And most of them, because they've been doing it naturally for so long, they don't recognize it as that special. And you say, oh, what if I told you could charge this much for that? I could bring you into one of my coaching gigs right now, and I could place you, and they would give you this much money a year if you could just do that. And they say, I could do that all day long. Yes. The key is knowing what it is. And most people don't know what it is. So we developed this process, and it's fun, it's intuitive, it's 3 hours, it's live, and people really enjoy it.
That's great. Do me. Yeah.
I'm happy to do it. Afterwards, send me an email and say, I'd love to discover my genius. My schedule will put you on the calendar, and we'll find out yours. And it's a super fun process and very powerful.
Well, I was actually being facetious, but thank you. I will take you up on that.
I'm happy to do it. It's the most joyful thing I get to do every day. I do about 3 of them a week,
All right.
And it's really fun. Yeah.
Good.
So what kind of companies are benefiting from this right now? Are you doing this corporately, or is it you got individual CEOs that come to you? What's the model? So if I'm an entrepreneur and I want my management team to do this, like tell me about the business and like the mechanics of getting to do this and how,
Sure.
and like some of the, and maybe even a story of a discovery, like somebody did this and it's just led to a whole new life.
Yes. So we started with Fortune 1000 CEOs. We charged them an absolute bloody fortune because if you didn't, they didn't take it seriously. Okay. But on any given day, there's only 1,000 Fortune 1000 CEOs, and probably every day 2 or 3 of them get fired. So he said, "All right, this is maybe not a big enough market. It was profitable, but it wasn't as fun." So then we said, the concept works for everybody. So then we started going to the Fortune 1000 companies and saying, "What if we did it with your teams, and we could do as many as 200 people at a time in a group session," which was very different. It's a full day. We'd call it a Genius Talent Day. Slower. It's not 3 hours. It's a full day because you've got the people dynamics, but it unified the team because at the end, what we'd do is on little 5x7 cards, we'd write out everybody's genius talent, but no names. And we'd take 10 people at a time. We'd give them each a sheet and say, match the 10 people in your little tribe to the genius talents. They go, Rhett. Oh, this is absolutely Rhett. And they go, how'd you know? It's so obvious. It's like, wow. We did that so that Rhett could say, wow, I got it right. Because sometimes people say, maybe this isn't right. Well, when 9 of your cohorts say, yeah. And then we'd ask another question that's non-industry related. We say, who should run this year's holiday party? That's a talent, but not a. So usually it's the CEO's admin calls a caterer, gets a band. People come and drink way too much. They don't take care of the spouses, and it's terrible. And everybody wakes up with a headache the next day. What if you actually had people that were naturally inclined for hosting and taking care of people? Well, there are those people, and they might be in the accounting department. That because it's a talent, it's not a job description. So we'd ask those sorts of questions. We would say they wouldn't even know who that person was. They'd say this talent should be doing it, and this talent over here. These 4 people, who are they? And then we'd flip them over and reveal the names and say, would you 4 work together this year on the holiday party? They say, oh, we're so glad you asked. It's been a dead bore for 10 years. It sure has. And that's what talent does, because talent is agnostic from job description. So so we do it with individuals. That's my favorite way to do it because it's intimate, but we can do it with a large group as well. We love to work with entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs can change the world. I mean, if they go and do what they do really well and come up with, they solve problems and change the world. So we like working with entrepreneurs, but we work with children as young as 12. Imagine, when you go Thanksgiving and your relatives come over and say, David, what are you gonna study when you go off to university? What do you want to do when you grow up? And you go, I'm 17. I don't have a clue. Wouldn't it be nice to actually know what your talents are and say, I got this weird talent, and I'm thinking of diving into that. So I'm going to study this because I think it would support it. That'd be super helpful. We don't do it. We don't do it that way. So
our education system isn't designed for that in any way.
It's not designed for it. It's designed for conforming and compliance. It's also linear. What if you're not linear? What if you're artistic or a storyteller or what if you could do your history project on the Alamo, the Battle of the Alamo, but do it with Legos and build a model and do it like that? That's just as useful of a talent as writing out a 5-page paper. But we have to write out a 5-page paper. Everybody has to write out a 5-page paper, and you think, okay, one of the 3 of us is going to get a D because we're not inclined to do that, and so we just don't have it set up to run on talent. And so that's actually how we scale companies, is we have them double down on badass talent. A lot of that's discovering what it is, much more so than it is hiring it in. Some of it, when you need engineers, you say, I want the best engineer, and you can kind of test for that. But sometimes you just need people that are really ambitious, and you could use their talent wherever you can place them. figure out what the talent is, and then say, hey, could you help in this team? Sure, I could.
Yeah.
And they'd love it. They'd absolutely love it.
The idea of, behind Gallup's Strength Finders.
Strength Finders is really good. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. How would you contrast what you do with the Strength Finder modality, or that whole instrumentation that they work with?
Strength Finders, my favorite that's my second favorite. My favorite is Kolbe, Kolbe, and they test instincts. They're using psychometrics.
Right.
So they're in today's language, they're using a large language model, and they're saying, you answered these questions according to statistical analysis. So if each of us answered the questions, and statistically it's probable, it's like 1 out of 8,000 answers the same, we'll actually get the exact same report. We don't see it because it says, David, you're great at this, and Rhett, you're great at this, and then the text is all the same because we answered in the same way. We look at it as like DNA. There's been about 100 billion people that have roamed the planet. We say we're looking for 1 in 100 billion. And I've done about 8,500 of them individually. I've never had 2 even close to the same. It's not, the process reveals what comes up. Some are thematically in the same direction, but they're super specific, like a bullseye from 2 miles. It's that specific. And the Strengths Finders they're pretty good. They're on the bullseye. When you're an archer, they're on that target. Ours isn't just the bullseye; it's the bullseye from 2,000 yards, and we want it that specific because it's more useful. And then the hard part is to get people to say, "Well, what do I do with that?" That's not my whole life. You say, "But what if you turned that into more of your life?" There's plenty for you to do in this arena. It means you got to get rid of all the crap that you're not very good at, that you're required to do by your job description or your parent role or your whatever role you're stuck with. Some of it good, some of it bad. What if you could free that up and actually make a living? And like I've done that with my coaching practice. That's why I only coach CEOs, because CEOs fit my genius talent almost precisely. So it's and middle managers don't. I'm terrible with middle managers. It's just a different model. So I do outsized results with CEOs, and I do horrendously poorly with mid-level leaders. I'm just not very good with them.
Yeah.
Fine.
It's a genius.
But the thing is, everybody has a genius, and that's the thing. That's the biggest question we get is, well, what if I don't have one? You say, no, you have one. It's just, what is it?
Yeah.
And I don't know the candidates, and that's actually better because I have no dog in the fight. I just run the process.
Why is it so hard for us to find those?
What's that?
Why is it so hard for us to find what our genius is? When there are these hints along the way, right? We all have these we all see at some point what we love or what we're passionate about, but why do we ignore those? And how do we?
I have 2 theories on that. One is it's if you believe in God, and I'll assume that some people do, maybe it's God made it so simple to put it in your DNA so you couldn't lose it. And of course, it's the last place we look. So for most people, it's right here, and they say, I just don't know I can't see it. You go, yeah, and all we do is go like this and say, what if we're right there? And they go, oh, that. Oh, you just bring it into focus. So that's one. The other is when you're a kid, when you're less than 5, you can do almost anything and it's allowable. And at school, we start socializing kids and saying, you're not allowed to do it that way. You have to do it this way. And so you actually get chastised for being outside of the herd. And so what can look like brilliant talent actually can be you get penalized for it. I used to get chastised because I'd have these wild ideas to make money as a kid, and I would make a ton of money for an 8-year-old. And my mom would always say the same thing. She'd say, keep that up. A lot of guys like you have failed at that. Well, that's the messaging. And so I was like, should I not come up? Now I couldn't not come up with these crazy ideas, and they almost always worked. But I got chastised for it because in her mind, I wasn't learning the value of hard work, because she understood that it's a virtue. And I'm going, why would I work at Baskin Robbins all day on a Saturday and get tendonitis when I could go, I could buy a lawnmower, I could cut 4 lawns on a Saturday and make $60, or I could go to Baskin Robbins and make 11 in an 8-hour shift. Why would I do that? But I would get chastised for it because I wasn't learning. Right, I wasn't learning the value of hard work, and so we get those messages as a kid, and so people tend to shun it and say, "Oh, that really? That's valuable." You go, "Yeah, super valuable. What you can do, like
I love it,
incredibly valuable and fun too." Because people, here's the other thing with Genius Talent: you can do it all day, every day, and you're energized, because you're naturally built to do it. And there's other things that you're really, really good at that we've learned, that if you do it all day, you got a lot done, but you're exhausted. And that's how you can tell the difference between something that's a really high level skill and natural genius talent. Natural genius talent, you could, it never wears you out. You never get bored with it. And there's no ceiling to the ability. So if they throw you in something you've never encountered, like 4x the size challenge, you'll figure it out, because you say, wow, I've never worked on a problem this big, but this looks fun. Instead of, there's no way I'm taking this on. This is too scary. No, it just looks like fun.
Yeah. Wow. John, this is great. We could keep this conversation going for much longer than we have time for. We got a couple of other shows. We'd love to have you on. When David's available again, which will be soon, we'll get you back on office hours again, so we can actually have him benefit from this as well.
No, that's great. And if you're interested, I'm serious. Send me an email. I'll get you on the calendar. My gift.
Okay. I'd love it. I'm intrigued with this. This is so spot on with a couple of things that I'm working with as well, and some of the things that we're working with on the Napoleon Hill Institute. I mean, I'm just thinking of the idea of hypnotic rhythm, and how things just kind of get moved into the background when we stop even playing, like we're alive, or that we've got a mind to use. Where can people find out more about it?
So
there we go.
To Evoking. Evoking Genius is the website. It's got all the information, and simple. It's got testimonials from some famous people too. You'll see, and it's pretty self-explanatory. I'm easy to Google, shockingly. Nobody wants the SEO, so I own all of that. If you Google me, you'll see somewhere in there everything from my fourth grade attendance record, which was pretty sketchy, to anything I've ever done. So easy to find.
Yeah, at least you can laugh about it, John.
Sister Mary, none too pleased, was not too pleased with me, I got to tell you.
Oh boy. Thank you, my friend. It's been great having you on the show. Look forward to talking more.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it, guys.
You bet. Take care.
All righty.
Love this. Fascinating guests. Wow.
I thought of instantly several clients who could use this, and where it would apply to their management teams, their to their mid-level management. Talk about really doing something that would let you understand talent development and what you have to work with. Wow.
Yeah. You build great companies by building great people. And I love your question about how come more people don't have access to this on their own. My experience tells me that about 99% of the population does not know themselves. Individuals do not take the time to look inside and say, who hangs out in this bag of skin? Who's here?
Yeah. What do I want? Who am I? Right.
What wants to be expressed as fully as it could possibly be expressed? That's where we tap into the soul that gives life to everything. And the whole idea of this, you tap into that in a business, you got the soul of business just dancing for you.
Do you think, I got to ask you a philosophical question now, Blaine, with so much going on, I mean, we're at this sort of seminal moment, right, in time, and there's going to be disruption. I mean, technology always disrupts jobs and changes the way we think about work. And do you think this is the time where people are going to actually have to do that? Maybe be forced to understand themselves like we're talking about, in order to like make the transitions and to be able to survive in the next and thrive. I mean, I just wonder like where we're headed. I wonder if some of that introspection, some of that self-work is not almost necessary to make these big shifts.
Well, yeah, I think, to answer from my perspective, part of that question, the way you begin to shift paradigms, and then this is essentially, mindset, people, get complacent and that whole notion of hypnotic rhythm. We get lulled into just kind of going along the way we've always gone along. The way you change a paradigm is one of two ways, either through mindful, intentional repetition of something new or through trauma. Either great surprise or great trauma, tragedy. That pop it's a wake-up call.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't recommend trauma as a mechanism, but when it happens, it can be used. It can be used. And I think we are in the midst of, if not, on the cusp of or in the middle of some great trauma to people's sense of who we are as a people. And you take that and bring it down. Who am I as an individual? And how do I navigate this thing called life? So it's not just surviving and eking my way out of it. How do I thrive here?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I just wonder if that's, and I was also thinking about with his tool, I mean, why are we not doing this in colleges and universities? And I mean, I'd love for my boys to understand, I mean, because you float, like, I don't know about your 20s, but my 20s were a period of discovery and trying to figure out who I was going to be. And I think they've got to figure it out maybe sooner than we did, or I mean, I think, they're at this point where things are moving so fast. You don't want to be left behind in this change. So I don't know. It's an interesting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I loved your question when we were talking before our first guest came on, the whole question of what if. I mean, that positions some very interesting explorations. So,
powerful questions.
Powerful. So, takeaway. What's your takeaway today?
I find both of those tools and those products just fascinating from the standpoint that we have so much more information today than we've ever had, and it's sort of democratized in a way because not only is it available to the Fortune 50 or the Fortune 100 or the Fortune 1000, if I run a mid-sized company, I probably can hire them and come and do that with my management team. I can probably figure out who my A talent is. I can probably hire them to help me figure out who my good talent is. So I think the name, what it tells me is that more and more and more, I've really become an advocate of, particularly for the clients I work with, founders and startups, to like really, really use this data. Like you've got access to such amazing tools now that levels the playing field. Like you can compete now at a different level. So.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. I mean, again, it kind of goes back. I guess my takeaway here is, the question, what if? I mean, I'm gonna just crib that from you. Both of our guests today, just kind of, positioned that question in a very interesting way. What if we could, look at, productivity through visibility of centers of influence, nexus of influence, decision making. I mean, most companies don't have any clue as to how that web actually is existing. And the problem with change is the disruption to relationships that change causes. And if you don't have a mechanism to level set the relationships quickly, you're going to be in a world of hurt. And most people can't do it because they don't know what those relationships are that are being disrupted. And the idea of inner genius. I mean, all of my work with my clients is organized around, who's the you that's showing up? Who's the you? That question of authenticity. Yeah, it's what you're left with when I stop trying to manage your perception of me. Well, I want to be sure that it's something that's valuable.
That's right. That's right. I mean, so what, another wow episode, right?
Yeah. Rhett, I love working with you. Look forward to continuing the conversations in very deep and fascinatingly creative ways.
Well, Blaine, it's a pleasure. And hearts go out to Dave and everybody that's listening and watching. Please send him your condolences and send him your well wishes. I'm sure those will be uplifting to him.
Yeah, for sure. And you see a little QR code there. I'm going to just do a shameless plug. We've got a mastermind coming up. It's actually, we're putting people on the wait list right now for it. So if you're interested in finding out more about some of the work that I'm doing, particularly in the leadership mindset mastermind, how do you work with mindset? That's all we're working with, mindset in a leadership context. Feel free to scan that QR code, and you can see along the Chiron down at the bottom there. You can, down there. leader.blainebartlett.com/leadership-mindset-mastermind. And that'll give you a landing page where you can actually get onto the waiting list, and it'll give you information there that you can actually check out. So check it out, and we'll see you on the next episode.
All right.
This is Rhett Power. Loved having you here.